I wanted to make a video about addiction. Part of the video is going to be from a religious perspective. Part of it is going to be from personal experience. Part of it is going to be from a medical perspective, and part of it is just pure logic. Uh, Addiction is different from dependence. Dependence is when you are dependent on a substance, meaning if you don't take it, you are going to go into withdrawals. The worst manifestations of dependence are commonly seen with heroin withdrawals and alcohol withdrawals. As a matter of fact, alcohol is such a bad drug that it is essentially the only drug where you can die from withdrawals. Heroin addicts generally don't die from withdrawals. Heroin withdrawals are characterized by just generalized pain, diarrhea, nausea, insomnia, chills, just like a bad flu. Alcohol withdrawals are characterized by hallucinations, cardiovascular instability, severe confusion, uh, tremors, etc. And people do die from that. It's called delirium tremens. So that is dependence, and there's definitely a role in treatment of dependence uh, to help people quit their addiction. However, that is a minor role. I mean, it's major still, but it does not cure addiction. Treating dependence does not cure addiction. So helping people get off dope does not cure their addiction at all. Uh, because you have so many drugs that don't produce significant dependence. Cigarettes are one of them. Marijuana, cocaine. All of those don't really produce significant withdrawal symptoms except on a psychological level, which is addiction. In essence, addiction is using something that is harmful to you, that you shouldn't be using, that you become obsessed with, and you continue to use it no matter the consequences. It just kind of takes over your life. It becomes your god, for the lack of a better purpose. You live for it. You cannot imagine life without it. That is everything to you. It is just a habit, a runaway habit. It's gone too far. That's addiction. And the drug does not matter. I mean, even food. People can have unhealthy relationships with food, and it is just an addiction. It is just an addiction. It is they use their drug as a coping strategy for whatever problems they have, and that coping strategy itself becomes a problem after a while. The addiction itself is a lifelong thing. Whoever has tried something that they liked, a drug that they liked, even food, will have that issue, that temptation, for the rest of their life. The natural course of addiction, the way it plays out with people, especially people who quit. Initially, it's very hard to quit. It's very hard to even try to quit, and you have to really be driven to do that, and that doesn't happen very often. That is why a lot of people, they don't quit. Instead of quitting, what they'll do is they will rationalize and excuse their behavior as if it's not harmful. I need it, otherwise I'm going to kill people. I need it, otherwise I'm going to get mad. I need it, for whatever reason. You see it even with people who smoke cigarettes. And you see this rationalization. So we do that because we don't want to quit. We like the behavior, and that's the issue. Every addiction, all addiction starts with the initial step, trying the substance, trying the drug. Nobody woke up nobody wakes up and wants to be a fiend. Nobody wakes up and wants to be an alcoholic. Nobody woke up one day and wanted to be a dopehead. What they did is they decided to try it. And then after they tried it, they liked it, so they wanted to do it again. And it's always a slow burn. You sink into it slowly. You do it one time, then a month later you do it, then 2 weeks later you do it. And those who will get addicted, it's just a slow burn, and before you know it, you woke up, and now you're a dope fiend, now you're an alcoholic, now you're a pothead. It doesn't matter. Now you're 600 pounds. And that creates a cycle of depression and just feelings of worthlessness. And then what do? You use your coping mechanism to deal with it. and your coping mechanism is your actual problem. And it can be very, very difficult to understand the problem. It can be difficult to understand the people who have this problem, and it can be difficult to help them, because you can't help those who don't want to help themselves. You can help them with the dependence. That's easy, but with the addiction, it's a lifelong process. So people who do start to quit, they need strategies. Very few people just quit on the first time. Just about nobody does. To understand what recovery is, you can be clean for 10 years and relapse and be a dope fiend overnight. All of us are one. Some people have found a coping strategy, for example, to microdose, that allows them to be a productive members of society, and that's fine. But microdosing just means that is always in play in your life. Meaning, if you're one tragedy away from being in a full-blown relapse. And this is what's to be expected in recovery. People are going to get tempted. The temptation gets less and less over the years. The longer they're able not to use it, the temptation gets less and less, but it never fully goes away. And relapse mitigation strategies do exist. Some people are able to say, I am not going to use this particular drug for the next 6 months, for the next 3 months, for the next year, no matter what. And when they achieve that goal, they're able to use that drug and then immediately stop again for the same period. In that matter, people who have used a drug several times a day now will use it a few times a year at most, and they're able to have productive lives. They're able to take care of their duties to God and so on. It's not perfect, but it is an option. The best thing to do is never to try it. The second best thing to do is to quit completely. And then, for the weak people, which is most of us, we go into mitigation strategies to actually allow us to preserve some semblance of our lives. So, it's important to understand these pitfalls when dealing with drugs. And it's important to understand the mindset of people that we're dealing with. They don't want to constantly be badgered to quit. They know they want to quit too. They know they should quit. But whoever has either smoked cigarettes or had a drug habit or even had an unhealthy relationship with food should realize on their own personal experience that you can't just simply have people badger you into quitting and changing your life. You have to do it on your own. So to really help people with drugs, the only way you can help them is to understand the difference between helping them and enabling them. You should never enable them. You should help them, but never enable them. And that's a different topic. That's very situation specific, and different strokes for different folks. So it's kind of hard to just say, have a blanket statement what enabling is and what helping is. But understanding the process of addiction and understanding the process of recovery definitely helps. So that's kind of personal experience, logic, perspective, even medicine. From a medical perspective, and also from just experience, basically drugs are broken down in 4 categories. You have your stimulants, which is cocaine, Adderall, methamphetamines. They're all the same. You have your depressants, which is your benzodiazepines, anxiolytics, Ativan, Xanax, clonazepam, clonidine, clonazepam. You have your weed. You have the narcotics, morphine, heroin, fentanyl, and then you have alcohol. That's it. Those are the categories of drugs. And everybody prefers a different drug. Everybody prefers a different feeling. From a medical establishment perspective, as far as drugs are concerned, yes, it is very true that the medical establishment prescribed tons and tons and tons of narcotics to people. That is not, however, that was not that was not because doctors are some weird, evil people because that they want to addict everybody. That's not true. It's a multifactorial. What happened is actually multifactorial, and it's happening now with Adderall. So, doctors were taught in medical school that this is the right thing to do when people have pain, and the government came out and said that pain is the fifth vital sign, whatever that's supposed to mean. So, and coupled with medicine being a service industry, we people demand pain medications for relief of even the slightest pain. If you break your finger, all you need is ibuprofen, but people demand narcotics. So some doctors are not as good in not giving these things. And then when you really look at the business of medicine, where companies, contracted companies, can change, hospitals can change contracted companies, for example, in the ERs, where people can lose their jobs any day. And it all depends on what we call Press-Ganey scores or satisfaction scores or whatever. You can see the drive to give these medications out. Of course, some doctors opened up pill mills and they were just money hungry, but those are the ones that got caught. The rest of the doctors they have been fooled themselves, so they fooled people. And you have these other confounding circumstances. So what happened is doctors prescribed tons of these, and when we realized that they were dope, we tried to not prescribe them. But what happened then? Well, then people just turned to street narcotics, and you had the heroin epidemic, which is still in full blow. Now, the same issue is happening with Adderall. Adderall is dope. Adderall is meth. It is just dose dependent. If you take enough Adderall, you will have the same experience you would have on meth. Exactly the same. You just take enough. And doctors are taught that ADHD is a real condition. It may be in less than 0.0001% of the time. It may be. But Adderall is a performance enhancer. It is dope. And it will provide the same level of addiction for people who like stimulants as heroin has provided for those who liked narcotics. And it is very difficult from my perspective to fight this because the establishment says this is what needs to be done. This is the quote-unquote general medical knowledge. And even though we know it's wrong, I know it's wrong. I know Adderall is dope because I tried it. It's hard to make that argument in a clinical way. So, because I can't decide studies to show this, but I know clear as day it's a fact. Whoever did Adderall knows that it's dope. I don't care, but because we need this somebody to excuse our behavior, and because we wouldn't go to a dope house, we wouldn't go to a trap house and get our meth. We pressure our doctors to prescribe it for us, to even prescribe it to our children because they are demanding it, because they're in college, their friends are doing it, and they feel their friends have an unfair advantage. But it is dope. And this is how we are going to have a stimulant epidemic. Maybe it's probably already too late now. If you try to change the patterns of prescribing now for those who are already on it, at least 10% of them would become meth heads, and that is a huge number of people. So this is from a medical perspective. It's not just crooked doctors trying to sell you dope. It is much deeper than that. It is the people themselves as well. It is the education. It is, so the pharmaceutical companies do have influence, and unfortunately, this influence is very difficult to fight against because I'm trying to fight against it, but half of people who hear me speak are going to say, no, the medical community is against what you say. You're wrong, and that's just the way it is. That's why it's hard to fight against it. So, what does God say about dope? What does God say about intoxicants? In the 5th chapter of the Quran, God says, O you who believe, intoxicants and gambling and altar setup and dividing by arrows are an abomination of the devil. Avoid them that you may be successful. Surely the devil is trying to introduce hatred and animosity among you by means of intoxicants and gambling, and to keep you away from prayer and from remembrance of God. Will you not then stop? That's it. In other parts of the Quran, prayer was identified as the greatest purpose of prayer was identified as remembrance of God. And in this verse, we are told that that the devil is trying to make us forget about God. And that's the beginning point of our downfall. Once we forget about God, once we abandon prayer, we're done. The devil is trying to introduce hatred and animosity among you by means of intoxicants and gambling. Our mental health crisis, our homelessness crisis is fueled by drugs. Our crime epidemic is fueled by drugs. All of it is fueled by drugs. That is exactly what is happening. The devil has introduced hatred and animosity among you by means of intoxicants and gambling. And we were warned. So God invites us to stop. Will you not then stop? Now you know, will you not then stop? And again, it's very difficult to stop. For most of us, it is very, very difficult to stop. God does make this a sin, but God says, "O you who believe, do not approach prayer while you're intoxicated until you know what you are saying." It doesn't say, "I'm gonna send you to hell." It says, "Once you're sober, you can come back to me and keep up prayer." Prayer is the most important thing. God says, "And recite what has been revealed to you from your Lord, and keep up prayer. Surely prayer keeps away from indecency and evil, and remembrance of God is greatest." You keep prayer, you can't get high, you can't get drunk. You can only do so at a certain times where you can sober up enough to then go pray. And that becomes tasking. It's not pleasant. It's just kind of So you either choose God or you choose the devil. And I've described some mitigation strategies. Prayer is also a mitigation strategy. You just have to make it the most important thing. If you can't quit completely, if you cannot force yourself to quit completely, you have to say, okay, all right, let's do a week. Let's do 2 weeks. I'm going to do my 2 weeks, and then I'm going to not do my dope or whatever. Even my food, I'm going to eat healthy for 2 weeks. Then I'm going to pig out. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to smoke that weed. I'm going to drink my alcohol, but I'm going to make sure that I do it in such a way to where I don't miss any prayers. Not only will you use less, but you will see that it will take you out of bad situations. Then you extend that period of time, and you want to extend it to at least 3 months eventually. So if you're a smoker and you don't smoke for 3 months, and then you smoke a pack for 5 days, and then you quit smoking again for 3 months, you are in a far better position than you were when you were smoking a pack every day. Way better position. So that is drugs. Those are some of the mitigation strategies that I would suggest. But the best thing is to keep to God and quit completely. And the best thing is not to try, to be honest, because it's once if you like it, it's a trap. It is what it is. So that is drugs. And that's kind of how I understand it.